Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for today's devotion. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you. Would you let other people know about it so they can listen to it as well, or like it so that it'll help get the word out? If you're watching the video, thank you. Also, let other people know about that and like it, and just pass the word. Today we are in chapter 20 of the book of Numbers in the Old Testament. This is a short chapter, but wow, it's got a lot in it. Miriam and Aaron both die in this chapter. The people continue their pattern of grumbling and complaining against Moses in this chapter. The nation of Edom, who are the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother. So the descendants of Esau, Edom, refused to allow Israel passage through their country on the way to the promised land. But in the midst of all that, what caught my heart, my attention, is verse 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you have not believed me to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them." That Aaron and Moses, you're not going to make it to the promised land. You will die before the people enter. The story in this chapter is the people were complaining about the lack of water. God says, Moses, take the rod, go to the rock, but speak to the rock. And when you speak to it, water will come forth. Moses went to the rock with the rod, but he was so frustrated, he allowed his emotions to get the better of him. And rather than doing what God said and speaking to the rock, so the water would come out, Moses struck the rock with the rod. And in so doing, disobeyed God. Now, the rod, think about this. This is the rod that he and Aaron had back in Egypt as part of the Exodus. And they struck the Nile River with it, and the water turned to blood. This is the rod that the Bible tells us in the book of Exodus that Moses held up and stretched out over the Red Sea when God parted the waters. The same rod that he held up again and stretched over the sea a second time as God allowed the waters to collapse, fall back over the Egyptian army and drown them. It's the same rod that earlier, when in Exodus 17, I think it is, when they first arrived at Mount Sinai, which is also called Mount Horeb, and they needed water, God had Moses there strike a rock at that mountain with the rod, and water came out. Now, they're getting closer, 30-some years have passed, and they're getting ready to start the journey into the promised land. They need water, and God doesn't tell Moses to strike the rock. He tells him to speak to it, but Moses disobeys and strikes the rock. And it had consequences. Aaron would die a little bit later. Moses would lead the people to the edge of the promised land, but not to get to go in himself. Joshua would take them in. Moses would die on Mount Nebo, seeing the land, but never setting foot in it. Consequences. Disobedience always has consequences. Listen, even after a long life of obedience, disobedience still has consequences. And we all know people who did well for so long, but did not finish well. Now, the reason verse 12 struck me, there's a phrase in it, to treat me as holy. Look at verse 12 again. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you have not believed me to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel," because remember, they hit the rock with the rod in front of everybody rather than speaking to it as God had told them. When you obey God, what verse 12 is saying is when you obey God, you are treating him as holy. When you disobey God, you are treating him as unholy. And when you do that in front of people, it carries even more weight. Disobedience in public has more consequences because of the influence on others. Obedience always matters, but I was just touched by the idea that when I obey God, what I'm really doing is treating God as holy. But when I disobey God, it's like I'm saying, God, you don't count. God, you're not holy. And I was captivated by that reality, that obeying God means I view him as holy, and disobeying him means that in that moment I do not view him as holy. Obedience always matters. It's the reason Jesus in Luke 6 said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and then don't do what I tell you, what I say? And as I prayed after reading this, part of the prayer I wrote in my journal was, God, grant me a heart, a mind, and a will of obedience. And then I'm 63 years old soon. Well, no, I'm 64 now. I just had my birthday. That's right, 64. I also pray, God, help me finish well. Don't let me mess up like Moses did. And I want to finish well. How you obey God or disobey God says a lot about how you actually view God. Do you view him as holy or not? That thought captured my heart. I pray it captures yours as well. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.